We are starting our next session here with Shaun Klann, who's the president and head of real estate at Willow. This is our second presentation from Willow today. This afternoon, the executive series is kind of more strategic level. Shaun has been he's been working in the industry. He's focused on IoT and smart connected real estate for most of his career. For the past 18 years, he's worked on a number of large projects with major developers. He's worked for the federal governments. He's developed some blockchain and smart contract technology. So pretty cutting edge experience that you've had, and now you're leading the real estate division for Willow. And I think you're joining us from New York. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this for us today, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. And just a reminder to everybody, if you have questions during the presentation, please use the chat window there, and we'll have the opportunity to kind of vote those questions up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shaun. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So let me just start sharing my screen, and we can begin momentarily. Excellent. So it's with great pleasure today to present to the broader audience. Really enjoy the opportunity here to present to this group. As Tom mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit today about unlocking the power of digital twins, specifically talking about some of the current trends, some of the use cases, some of the hype that's in the industry, some of the reality that's in the industry, and then specifically we've been asked to present on what was Willow's journey going through and navigating through this process of digital twins, and what does it mean to the design and the construction industry, and what does it mean for the building owners and the operators that are going to be working inside of the built environment. So, we're going to touch a little bit on digital twins becoming mainstream and common stream. Specifically, have they passed the hype test? Are they more than just hype? Are people actually using them, or is it just another buzzword that we're hearing a lot about in today's kind of commentary? So a little bit on what is a digital twin. We'll talk about the spectrum of approaches. There's a wide spectrum of approaches when it comes to digital twins, and it's really important to ground the conversation a little bit to say what is applicable inside of real estate, and how do we approach that. And then specifically, what is Willow's approach? How does Willow approach it, and then how are we looking at it into the future? So a little bit about me. Tom did a great job of doing an introduction. I've spent the better part of my career in the smart building space. So moving up through architectural engineering, master system integration, managing consulting, and running business practices that specifically look for applying technology across the domain of real estate and infrastructure. So how do we build buildings? How do we maintain buildings? How do we experience buildings and real estate assets, leveraging technology, and how does that impact, whether that's the design phase, the construction phase, or the operational phase? So 2 years ago, I embarked on a journey to bring digital twins to the built environment. It was something that I saw through the better part of my career that was missing, and was essentially the missing link in a broader chain of how do we create these digital information, and how do we find a home for it where it actually becomes useful. So let's just start very broad in terms of asking the simple question: what is a digital twin? Well, the way we brought that on in terms of Willow was, let me talk a little bit about our journey and how we started to answer that question. We started out in this space, Willow specifically, as a digital design and construction company over 10 years ago. Not unlike many of the participants on the call today that are very vested in terms of finding more enabling digital technologies that will help at different phases of design construction and help with the handover process. So that's where we started, and we started being very early adopters of BIM and AR and VR and different technologies like that. And ultimately, what we found by going through that journey and going through a couple of journeys with some very trusted customers was that at the end of the day, a lot of digital artifacts were being created during the process, but none of them had a home. They were all ended up being just kind of scattered or underutilized in the secondary phase of the asset, that being either the operational phase or the experiential phase of the asset. So that process took us on a journey, leveraging our deep domain knowledge in design, construction, 3D modeling, other types of similar technologies, and using that background to morph into a software and technology company addressing those very specific problems that we saw in the industry and that our customers were seeing. So if you go back to the question on what is a digital twin, it's important to ground that conversation in the vertical that we're speaking about. So digital twins, were first pioneered by NASA in terms of creating some very early concepts for space exploration, being able to, model on the ground what the Apollo mission was doing up in space, and being able to troubleshoot and diagnose different scenarios remotely. And that's morphed into a different version or a different definition in many different industries, whether that's aerospace or automotive, whether that's healthcare or manufacturing. There's a wide spectrum of what is a digital twin in these spaces. And if we look at some common misconceptions for what is digital twins for the built environment, this is a good place to start, because there is a lot of misconceptions in terms of what is a digital twin, at least today in 2020, for the built environment, because a lot of people are taking the understanding of what a digital twin may be in these sectors and applying it to real estate. The problem why that is difficult is if you look at the background of this slide, all those buildings out there represent some type of a snowflake scenario. Different materials, built at different times, different technologies inside of them, built for different purposes. And if we look at some of these other industries, let's just say manufacturing, where we want to develop a digital twin of an aircraft engine. Well, companies will invest a tremendous amount of research and development to develop very sophisticated modelings for that specific engine, because it's going to be a one-to-many relationship. They're going to develop that model once, and it's going to be useful and applicable to thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of widgets that they will be producing on and over again, which requires a lot of research and development and modeling and things of that nature. If you look at this scenario where we have every type of shape, size, purpose of building out there, there's a limitation in terms of where the economics break down. It says, how far are we going to model? How far are we going to, produce some predictive solutions around these buildings, when we know it's only going to be applicable to this one building, and it's going to be different for the next building and the next building and the next building. So we have to find a way that we can make this scale and make it a platform that is scalable from building to building based on different use cases, different vertical sectors, different purposes, and different makeups of construction and size and vintages and so forth. So that helps just kind of ground, at least in my definition, what does digital twins mean for the built environment. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means today, how Willow's approached it, and specifically where do we think it's going to go past 2020, because where we are today is really just the tip of the spear. There's going to be a lot more innovations coming, leveraging Industry 4.0 technologies of ML and AI and blockchain and things of that nature to tap into the infrastructure of the digital twin for great customizations. So what is a digital twin specifically in the built environment? Well, simply put, it becomes a digital replica of a physical asset. So we can create a digital carbon copy of that physical building, and a new construction scenario gives us the ability to build that digital replica byte by byte while the construction of the building is physically being built brick by brick. So it organizes all the information that comes through at those early planning phases of construction and puts it into a format that can be used specifically to optimize performance and user experience inside of those buildings. And there's a story and an approach to be told both for existing buildings and for existing buildings. So why is the built environment embracing digital twins specifically? Well, let's look at some of the existing problems that we have. And this speaks more to the existing buildings and the existing assets. How do we create a digital twin of a building that's maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years old? Well, if we look at some of the problems that the industry is facing at large, whether it's a commercial property developer or investor, whether it's a corporate portfolio, they're all looking for ways to drive technology innovation or a digital transformation strategy across a broader portfolio in a geographically diverse area to be able to have insights into how's my overall portfolio operating. If we look at some of those existing problems, whether it's the live data, the dynamic data coming out of these buildings from the IoT devices and the systems and the sensors, well, of course, we have every possible make, model, manufacturer, version, vintage that you could think of. And how do we get all that information into a context that we could do something useful with? And live dynamic data is just one part of the problem. There's a whole nother part of the problem that says each one of these buildings in this picture is going to have a different existing condition for its asset information, its geometry, as-built, things of that nature. So these are some of the existing problems in the built environment that building owners are looking to solve for. If we look at new opportunities in the new construction area, well, there's more information, more digital artifacts being produced associated with our buildings than ever before. Whether that's design data, spatial data, as-built data, computational models that are used for early planning phases, commissioning data, purchase and procurement data, warranty data, operational and maintenance data. There's a lot of data that's produced, but it lacks a home. It lacks a home for where does that data go after construction. And if we look at large how we're still handing over our buildings today, we're handing over our buildings with just a large spectrum of different media types. Could be this image on the left where we're handing things over in 3-ring binders or Excel files or CD-ROMs or Dropbox links, or who knows where that information is going. But we do know it's going to multiple locations and it's not getting aggregated into a place that's going to be useful for the building and the operation and the experience phase. So transform over to the vision on the right, where we can start to input a digital twin to aggregate this information into a format that's going to have a use after construction. So who in this industry right now is embracing digital twins? Again, back to the question, is it hype or is it real? So there's a wide spectrum of different industry verticals that are currently adopting this, and we'll talk about some very purpose-built case studies at the end of the session. But we're seeing this deployed in corporate campuses in multiple applications. Commercial office developers are adopting digital twins. Sports and entertainment industry are beginning down this road. Airports are actively building digital twins of their new modernization projects and new construction. And then infrastructure on the rail and roads specifically are also adopting the concept of digital twins. And we'll get into a little bit of example of how that is coming into play. But specifically, this is saying that this is here today. These are all real examples of industries that are looking for new solutions to solve those problems that we just mentioned. So what's the industry's broader vision for a digital twin for the built environment? Well, this fast forwards a little bit to how Willow's approaching it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about our journey and our story and what our views on this specifically. Willow had made the decision to partner with Microsoft to bring the concept of digital twins to the built environment, leveraging the technology of IoT and cloud and AI and security to build a platform on top of that will be robust and scalable for a wide array of different use cases. So I'm going to show a quick video that I would say articulates the conversation better than I ever could. So just bear with me and we'll just do a short video.
The elevator is the nervous system of a building. We transport people, and transporting people is a very serious thing. So as an elevator company, we need to test the concept of elevators. Ottawa is called the village of towers, but now they have a real tower. I mean, a real tower. We are testing not only hardware, but we're also testing our thinking. For years, there was no change in this industry. With the help of Microsoft and Willow, we are on a different stage.
The Willow Twin is our feature platform, partnering globally with Microsoft. We're looking at the whole city and how we can leverage AI, IoT, and cloud and bring it into one solution that's robust, safe, it's secure, and it's scalable.
what Willow does is provide a digital twin replica of the built environment to bring together the static information that's produced during the construction of these buildings and the live dynamic information as well. We're leveraging the Azure Digital Twins platform. Microsoft was a natural fit for that because of the flexibility and scalability that offered for the data storage component of it, as well as the embedded security features that were built into that data storage.
The digital twin of the building enables us to show and also do testing in a digital world and digital environment instead of the real world, to check the behavior of the system, to do simulations of the system, people flow analytics, and to come to a very robust result without doing physical testing. This is the first time that we have a complete building with all the infrastructure, everything what we find in the building.
There's over 15,000 live data points on that building. There's over 57,000 static data points, and I can find them at a click of a button. We're able to demonstrate on the tower what would happen in an emergency. Knowing that all the people are out and they're safe, this digital twin gives me as an owner visibility into the things that matter for me in an emergency.
Digital twin is fundamentally changing how we're interfacing with the building, whether it's the occupant, the owner, or the operator. It won't be very long before every single building construction process ends up with a requirement to have a digital twin of the asset.
Willow with Microsoft are taking an enterprise solution to market that really does make our cities smart. The amount of information that we can now capture through the Azure Digital Twins platform is mind-blowing. Data from an infinite number of sources. So together with Microsoft, we will change the built world.
So just a little bit of an overview of, how this all comes together and what's the opportunity and what's the potential. So that story was around a test tower that was developed in Rottweil, Germany with ThyssenKrupp, and it was developed specifically to test the new multi-elevator. So if anyone's followed that, that's the world's first elevator that not only goes vertically, but it also goes horizontally. It's completely ropeless. It uses maglev technology. So it's a real industry game changer. And in order to understand not only how the elevator was going to operate, but the use cases that it could apply inside of the building for how to move people more efficiently throughout the space, we were commissioned to develop not only a digital twin of the elevator itself, but also of the entire building and how they interacted with other different IoT devices, systems, and sensors and assets inside of the building. So we were able to run through a wide spectrum of different testing scenarios and really leverage it to see how do we move people throughout the building most effectively. So that's just one example of how we can take all this information and put it into use. Now, looking towards the future a little bit, what is the future? So we talked a little bit about where digital twins are today in 2020 for the built environment, but what's possible? And if we believe in where Willow believes the industry is going, we have access today to certain levels of information, whether that's asset information, static information, dynamic data. But there's a lot more information that can be better integrated in a more seamless fashion into any digital twin, not just a Willow digital twin, but any digital twin. And if we go look again back at the early planning stages of a construction project, there's a host of different computational models that are developed, whether that's acoustical models or energy models, seismic models or thermal models, lighting models, and other simulations that are associated with how is the building going to interact with its environment. So that's all information that is very useful, again, during the design and planning phases, but wouldn't that information be useful years down the road in the event that there's seismic model developed about the asset? And then post-earthquake, what happens? Where do we get that information? It was turned over 10 years ago and nobody really knows where to find it. So this type of stuff needs a home, and we need to be able to store it so that we get continual use out of it and not one-time use. So the other thing is about how do we start to standardize the digital signature of assets coming from the supply chain, so coming from manufacturers, so that we understand what digital elements are we expecting to get from a pump or a fan or a VAV box or a light or whatever it might be. And there's a number of different industry initiatives that are starting to undertake to help standardization of the data elements associated with physical assets so that they can plug into a broader digital twin solution. And one of the things that is helping to stitch all this together is an industry movement called the digital twin definition language. This is a movement that is being led by Microsoft and is being partnered with Willow to help develop and define this and push this out to industry. But it's starting to really map through what is the relational elements of these devices with their environment, for whether it's a spatial relationship or whether it's an asset relationship or whether it's a system relationship. And there's some other metrics to it. So that's really the next evolution of this, is how do we start to go deeper back into the supply chain to get elements and artifacts that are going to be compliant to plug into this broader digital twin model. So again, we get more than one use out of this information, but we get perpetual use out of this information. So just a little look of where we believe things are moving next. So I was asked specifically to talk about what's Willow's approach. So to kind of take you a bit through our journey and what we believe a digital twin is, again, in 2020 for specifically for corporate and commercial real estate, it starts with 5 data sources. And those data sources start with, I'll go a little bit out of order here because it helps, but it starts with asset data and live data. So asset data being anything that's turned over during the construction process, could be warranty data, could be O&M manuals, can be metadata about, which circuit is this piece of equipment powered from. Live data from a wide array of IoT systems and sensors, live building systems, elevators, building automation, lighting control, etc. And we start with those data sources, and then we bring in occupancy data. We bring in enterprise data from, whatever other systems, could be a CMMS or an asset management system or an SAP or things of that nature. And once we have that inside the digital twin, it's important, I'll go back up to the top, it's important to be able to navigate that data and to provide context for troubleshooting and diagnostics. That's where the spatial data comes in. So we take all the other information and we lay that inside of, in a new construction situation or when available, into the 3D model or pair it with the 3D model. So we understand how that information lives and interacts inside of the geometry associated with the building. So if we start with those 5 data sources, we're able to map through the relationships and the interactions between people, places, and devices inside of the building. Once we have that, we can then prepare that data for a wide array of applications to customize the digital twin for the very specific use cases in mind. This is important because our underlying philosophy is that Willow is not the end-all be-all magic button solution to solve everything. Rather, there's a lot of great point solutions that exist in the marketplace, whether that's great point solutions around energy analytics, fault detection diagnostics, people counting technologies, things of that nature. And what we want to do is we want to take the data that was collected and harnessed and organized into the digital twin, then make it accessible specifically for different use cases and different personas associated with the building. So what does the owner want to see? What does the operator want to see? What does the occupant want to see? What does a facility manager want to see? What does a visitor want to see? What does a tenant want to see? So we understand what are these personas, and then we want to back through and says, what are the use cases associated with each one of these personas? And for each customer and each organization, these are going to be different. Some will be mission critical driven, some will be uptime and reliability, energy, some will be about attracting and retaining tenants. So we want to have the flexibility to be able to invoke any number of use cases and user groups. And we do that through a marketplace by taking the data that's structured inside the digital twin, making that available in the marketplace for a wide array of customizations that could be on the left, performance-based applications like command and control, fault detection diagnostics, maintenance requests, things of that nature, or experiential-based applications like access control, temperature interface for tenant service requests, emergency response, things of that nature. So lots of different levers to pull based on what it is you're trying to achieve in a broader context. So we wrap that digital twin around a marketplace of third-party applications that are truly best in breed and gives the owner the freedom and the flexibility to customize the digital twin in a perpetual fashion over time. So as we bring in these best in breed third-party solutions, it doesn't have to be a one-time, one size fits all solution. It can be, we're going to go with this best breed application for the next 3 years, and then we want to bring in whoever is the next best technology in that particular category, several years later, without having to go through the cost barriers of reintegrating and normalizing data. So specifically in the Willow context, what we deliver is a single source for all that asset information and dynamic data associated with the building, along with the geometry. Gives us the ability to track and validate and manage that data during the construction process, drive powerful insights into the operational experiential phase of the building, and then connect that information to best-in-class assets and technology. So how do we go about this process? Very simple. Step one is we define what is the vision for the customer. What type of information are they going to want to collect, and what use cases and user personas do they want to influence? Then we establish what that data collection framework is. How are we going to collect that information, and who are we going to interact with in the supply chain? We then validate and manage that during the project delivery. And that's a bit of a compliance phase, because we know if we don't provide some subtle influence during the project, the suppliers will typically go back to what they've been accustomed to doing. And what we ask them to do is generally a 3 to 5%, pivot from what they've traditionally done. We go through a handover and commissioning of the building, and then we are allowed to start customizing it for either that operational and maintenance phase of the building or for the experience of the occupants. So very simple 6-step process. And let me talk a little bit about how we harvest and we ensure integrity of the data. So this is specific for new construction, but when we have the once in a lifetime opportunity, when the crane is in the sky and we have the captured audience of the supply chain and we're producing those digital artifacts associated with the building, we want to be able to harvest them, and we want to be able to harvest them in an intelligent manner that allows us to structure that information, again, in a way that's going to be useful after handover. So we do that through a way of interfacing with the supply chain to collect that information, do real-time integrity analysis of the data to make sure that we're getting the type of data and the right kind of nomenclatures and formats and so forth that we're looking for. And then we can track the entire process during the construction process to understand which trades are performing, who's behind, who's on time, and so forth. And we've had some customers actually use this to either de-risk the handover process or to actually control as a lever for payments, to understand when can I pay my supply chain, how far are they progressing with their digital handover of the assets. And in one particular use case, we had, this is Mark Tate with Investa Property Group. When he cut the ribbon on this project, we were able to guarantee to him the day that ribbon was cut, that he received 100% of all the digital artifacts associated with the project. So there was no guessing to say, did I ever get the O&M manual for the chiller? Did I get the right one? Maybe it was a copy paste and it was the wrong information. All these scenarios that typically come to the surface 6 months to a year to 2 years after the construction is finished. These things are fleshed out immediately, so we know, yes, we got everything that we were looking to and that we were intended to get. So some real quick use cases with the time we have left. So who's currently using digital twins and why? So Microsoft is one example that is very much eating their own dog food in terms of deploying a digital twin technology and making their campus digital twin ready at scale. So they're currently going through a major modernization where they are tearing down 12 buildings, coming back out of the ground with 18 new buildings. Between the buildings and a parking structure, almost 4 million square feet of new construction taking place. Over $5 billion investment across the campus, and then on a wider spectrum, another $5 billion investment across the industry and IoT. Interesting story here is that, Microsoft is a course full of software developers and research and development labs and, a bunch of incredibly smart people that are looking to tap into the data inside of real estate, applying all their best in breed solutions, whether it's IoT, connectivity, machine learning, AI, all these great industry buzzwords. How do we apply that? And they've tried this over the last decade and had mixed results of it, because what they found was that they were tapping into their own buildings to, again, use it as a bit of an R&D learning center. And what they found was that the information, just like every other building owner, was scattered, was segmented, was no common elements to it. And it became very difficult for them to even do their own innovation and testing. So when they embarked on this new renovation project, they said it is a once in a lifetime opportunity to structure everything right so that we can really deliver to ourselves a perpetual learning lab, that we have all the information associated with our buildings that we can test and pilot and so forth. So that's the journey that they're going on right now, working closely with their supply chain to make sure that the process I just described is fully rolled out. And they're using that in a multitude of different ways. And there's a few other corporate campuses that are moving down a similar trajectory. Sofi Stadium is the world's largest stadium, host, of course, to the Los Angeles Rams and the LA Chargers, but also host to the opening and closing Olympics in 2018, Super Bowl in 2022, I believe it is, and a number of other big events. But the world's largest stadium at 3 million square feet, and I think it's approaching $5.5 billion of construction. They've embarked on a digital twin journey for a wide array of different use cases, but I think the one that's most relevant is this stadium one day will host a football game, of course. Another day, the opening and closing ceremonies of the Olympics. Another day, a monster truck show. The day after that, Taylor Swift is coming to town for a concert. So they need to have flexibility and adaptability inside of the stadium. So they need to be able to quickly reconfigure how it operates on a day-to-day basis. And the digital twin technology was a natural fit for them to be able to do that. Additionally, one of the use cases that they're exploring is, pre-game day on a Sunday for, call it a 12 o'clock kickoff. They would start on Thursday to do their readiness checks. Are the elevators working? Is the digital signage working? Are the lights working in the private suites? That they go through with clipboards, check by check by check by check. And with the digital twin, they're now developing scripts to go through an automated test and report scenario to say, is the building ready for game day? So that's going to take a process that generally started back on Thursday to get ready for Sunday to now drive forward and get ready, started on Saturday or started even hours before the game and go through that process. So just a couple examples in the sports and entertainment industry. And then finally, Willow Rail is a offering specific for the infrastructure space. So for rail, light rail and heavy haul, and then for roads and utilities as well. So this is specifically taking the same approach, but applying it to horizontal infrastructure versus vertical infrastructure. And what we've been able to do in the rail space is be able to maintain and build that digital replica of a infrastructure network so that the owner, in this case, this is Structon, who's Europe's leading rail maintenance provider and our JV partner in this effort. They were able to develop a command center so that they could maintain thousands of kilometers of rail network from a single location and understand what's taking place across their network, reduce downtime, reduce failure rates, and in turn get more efficiency and more efficiency out of the rail network itself. So just kind of wrapping up, at large, the whole process of a digital twin starts with just collecting the information and organizing it in a way that traditionally hasn't been done before, in the sense of 3D geometry or 2D geometry would sit in one world, asset information would sit in another world, live dynamic data and IoT sensor data would sit in another world. And it was very difficult to be able to tap into these different worlds to drive action and insights across a building or a portfolio. Additionally, there's a spectrum of different challenges between all the stakeholders associated with the creation of a new construction project, whether that's the designers, the architects, the engineers, the contractors, their supply chain, the commissioning agents, and then the building owner themselves, and of course the operators of that building, and then those that are going to experience the building. So how do we capture this data once, and then in a perpetual manner, find that secondary or tertiary use of that data so we can drive better results from the process that we've already invested in. We've already invested in creating the 3D model. We've already invested in creating and handing over this information during the handover process. So how do we find a home for it, and how do we find a better use for it in the future? So with that said, again, I'd like to thank everybody for allowing me to present. Hopefully this was informative. And Tom, I'll turn it back over to you for some potential questions if any came in.
Yeah, actually quite a few questions came in, but we are running really tight on time. So we'll get to some of the questions, and maybe we'll send the questions to you by email, and maybe you can follow up and answer some of them. But excellent presentation, really impressive platform, and really articulate in explaining the whole concept. So the one question here, which I think you kind of covered a little bit, was is your platform applicable for linear infrastructure projects or maybe developments like groups of buildings? I think Willow Rail obviously is designed for horizontal infrastructure, but do you have something that's more for like neighborhoods or complexes? I mean, it's probably applicable, right?
It very much is. So, whether it's a smart city, whether it's a district, whether it's a residential impact, the Sofi Stadium is a great example. That's being developed as part of a broader district. So there's a huge array of buildings being built up around that stadium. Okay, cool.
Another question was, you're obviously working in multiple countries right now, U.S., Canada, Australia. Out of the markets that you're familiar with, what market do you think is the most mature and likely to start? That you mentioned requirements that are going to be coming forward. What markets do you see these maturing first in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So today we go to market specifically in Australia, North America, and Europe. What we found is I think North America and Australia are really leading this movement from an innovation standpoint. And Canada is really leading the charge. I think everyone that we've interfaced in the Canadian market has been very progressive and innovative. So a lot of opportunities there.
Why do you think the Canadian market's been more innovative? You're obviously connected with Oxford and Brookfield. Do you think that they're more innovative or just open to new ideas, or is it just the size of these entities and the fact that they're operating in the Canadian and Australian market, trying to manage that complexity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the one of the great things of just the way that the Canadian market is set up as a commonwealth is a natural home for a lot of the pension funds and a lot of the REITs, and specifically a lot of them have very forward-thinking mindsets in terms of how do we digitize our portfolio and undertake a broader digital transformation effort. So I think just some of the leaders inside those organizations that you mentioned are very forward-thinking and are looking to maybe disrupt the status quo a bit. And we've been fortunate to be great partners in theirs.
You mentioned a standard, the digital twin definition language. Do you see that emerging as like an open source standard that the whole industry could potentially utilize for specifying, or do you see that implementing a digital twin strategy is always going to require an in-depth consultation, and a spec won't do the job alone?
Yeah, great question. Speaking on the digital twin definition language, so Microsoft is leading that initiative. I don't want to speak on their behalf, but I do know that they are very interested in turning this over to some other third-party open source environment. So I think they want to do the heavy lifting to create it, bring the consortium together to get some industry buy-on. As we all know, industry standards take some time and take a lot of hard work and dedication, but it's 100% intended to be an open source environment that everybody can tap into and so forth.
Yeah. We're maybe just one last question, and there's a number of questions I didn't get to, so we'll get those to you by email. But you mentioned that the overall strategy is to develop an ecosystem and have third-party applications tie into your system and potentially access the data via APIs. What's that marketplace look like right now? And if you were a technology developer, how could you start to work with Willow and tap into that data set?
Yeah, great question. So we have a marketplace manager that we will engage with any company that's willing to do that. So we have a process that we go through. So we're very hands-on going through that process to go through some different technology vetting processes, make sure that it's secure. What are the SDKs and APIs required to make that happen? So we can certainly, anybody's interested in coming into that marketplace, we're more than happy to have a conversation with them.
Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate your time today. You did an excellent job. Again, there's questions we didn't get to. We'll get those to you by email, and we're going to move on. So thank you very much, and thank you to our sponsors to help this happen for us. And we hope to talk to you again at a later date and get an update on the product. So we'll see you at the next session.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.